Actor Will Rogers once famously said, "You never get a second chance to make a first impression." This clever saying applies to many things, including, of course, the sport of mixed martial arts. So for this video, we'll be taking a look at a list of fighters who failed to deliver in their UFC debut. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, let's take a look at 10 of the worst debuts in UFC history. Number 10. CM Punk vs Mickey Gall. Phil Brooks, better known as CM Punk, is a retired professional wrestler who was once one of the WWE's biggest stars. Following his pro wrestling career, the longtime MMA fan set his sights on the UFC octagon. Despite having no amateur wrestling background or significant mixed martial arts training to speak of, the UFC decided to sign CM Punk to a multi-fight contract. CM Punk soon began training under MMA coach Duke Roufus, with a team that included top fighters like Anthony Pettis and Paul Felder. However, even they couldn't turn the MMA novice into a UFC caliber fighter. In September of 2016, at UFC 203, 37-year-old CM Punk finally made his highly anticipated professional MMA debut. His opponent was another newcomer, albeit a far more experienced one in New Jersey's Mickey Gall. The fight was a brief, one-sided affair that saw Gall take his opponent to the mat and secure a rear naked choke in the very first round. Despite his disappointing debut, CM Punk was given a second chance to turn things around when he faced Mike Jackson at UFC 225. However, even against another fighter who lacked legitimate UFC credentials, the former WWE superstar failed to meet expectations. Jackson pummeled Punk for the better part of 3 rounds, earning a unanimous decision in what could only be described as a sloppy affair. Following the lackluster contest, UFC President Dana White announced that CM Punk's days in the octagon were over. Number 9. Wanderlei Silva vs Vitor Belfort. Brazil's Wanderlei the Axe Murderer Silva became a legend during his days with Pride FC. While competing for the Tokyo-based promotion, Silva defeated megastars like Dan Henderson, Kazushi Sakuraba and his rival Rampage Jackson. However, for whatever reason, Silva struggled when competing under the UFC banner. The Axe Murderer's 1998 UFC debut against Vitor Belfort foreshadowed his struggles inside the octagon. When it was all said and done, their UFC showdown lasted just 44 seconds, with Belfort emerging the victor with a vicious TKO. While Silva may have been one of the most successful Pride fighters of all time, his UFC record stands at an unspectacular 5-7. Number 8. Mark Hunt vs Sean McCorkle. Back in 2007, when the UFC purchased the Japanese MMA promotion Pride, they inherited several fighter contracts. One such contract belonged to heavyweight competitor Mark Hunt. The UFC wasn't particularly excited about Hunt, who was sporting an uninspiring 5-6 record prior to his debut with the company. In fact, the UFC brass offered to pay Hunt $450,000 to opt out of his contract. However, Mark Hunt would decide to fight rather than accept the payout. In truth, the start of the New Zealander's UFC run couldn't have gone much worse. At UFC 119, Hunt's promotional debut would end in just over a minute courtesy of a straight armbar applied by Sean McCorkle. However, the hard-hitting heavyweight's very next fight would mark the beginning of a 4-fight winning streak that revitalized his career. Despite a tough start, Mark Hunt would enjoy a lengthy UFC career and even earn a shot at the interim heavyweight title. Number 7. James Toney vs Randy Couture. James Lightout Toney is a former pro boxer who held world championships in 3 separate weight classes. In 2011, James Toney was ranked 10th in the Ring magazine's list of top 10 middleweight title holders of the last 50 years. While Toney had some very impressive boxing credentials, his brief MMA career was lackluster to say the least. The former boxing champ's first and only mixed martial arts bout took place back in 2010 at UFC 118. His opponent was former 2-division champion and UFC Hall of Famer Randy the Natural Couture. In this classic striker versus grappler contest, the wrestler in Couture had a clear advantage. The Natural wasted little time getting his opponent to the mat, where he secured a first-round arm triangle submission. Following the bout, Dana White, who was critical of what some pundits had considered to be a freak show fight, wasted little time and opted to release Toney from his contract. Number 6. Luke Rockhold vs Vitor Belfort. As the man who held the Strikeforce middleweight championship when the UFC absorbed the company, Luke Rockhold was expected to make waves in his new promotion. While the Californian would meet expectations by becoming a UFC title holder, his promotional debut against Vitor the Phenom Belfort was admittedly disastrous. The two middleweights clashed at UFC on FX8 in May of 2013. That evening, Belfort landed a brutal spinning heel kick which resulted in a first-round TKO victory. Despite a disappointing debut, Rockhold would go on to win his next 5 fights, including a victory over Chris Weidman for the UFC middleweight title. Number 5. Patrick Cummins vs Daniel Cormier. After going 4-0 outside of the organisation, Patrick Cummins was immediately thrust into the UFC limelight. At UFC 170, Daniel DC Cormier was expected to face Rashad Evans in a light heavyweight bout with title implications. However, when Evans suffered a knee injury and was forced to withdraw, in stepped UFC newcomer Patrick Cummins. Having to take on a fighter as talented as Daniel Cormier on short notice, especially for one's UFC debut, is definitely a tough ask. While the newcomer was willing to step up, things unfortunately did not go his way. In the end, it would take DC just 1 minute and 19 seconds to swarm his opponent and secure a TKO victory. Sadly, the Cormier bout would be the most high-profile fight of Patrick's career. So, having accumulated a 6-7 record during his UFC tenure, this once undefeated prospect decided to retire in December of 2019. Number 4. Rafael dos Anjos vs Jeremy Stephens. Rafael dos Anjos is a former UFC lightweight champion who has defeated some of the best fighters in the world. He has signature wins over the likes of Nate Diaz, Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Anthony Pettis and Robbie Lawler. That said, most pundits didn't see the potential that RDA initially had due in large part to his slow start in the UFC. In his promotional debut back in 2008, the Brazilian faced the formidable Jeremy Stephens. While RDA made it through the first 2 rounds, he was eventually caught with a brutal uppercut that proceeded to knock him out cold. Following a 4-4 start in the UFC, the Southpaw would go on to win 10 of his next 11 fights, which even featured a reign as lightweight champion. Number 3. Ben Askren vs Robbie Lawler. Ben Funky Askren was an outstanding wrestler who dominated his opponents in both Bellator and ONE FC. However, for whatever reason, his style didn't seem to translate in the UFC. Despite winning his UFC debut against Robbie Lawler and maintaining an undefeated record, the fight was by far Askren's worst showing to date. Lawler dominated Funky throughout much of the contest and nearly finished him in the first round. In truth, if not for a highly controversial submission stoppage, it's very likely that Lawler would have gone on to win the fight. Of course, things would only get worse for Askren, when, in his very next fight, the former Bellator champ was on the receiving end of the fastest knockout in UFC history, courtesy of a Jorge Masvidal flying knee. He would then go on to suffer a submission loss to Damian Maia, which forced him to officially retire from the sport. Number 2. Anthony Pettis vs Clay Guida. Similar to RDA, Anthony Showtime Pettis is another former lightweight title holder whose UFC career didn't get off to the best start. Showtime had won the WEC Lightweight Championship right before the promotion was absorbed by the UFC. As such, there was plenty of buzz surrounding his promotional debut, which was a fight with divisional mainstay Clay the Carpenter Guida, a wrestler who often utilizes a takedown-heavy approach to neutralize his opponents. As such, his grappling-based attack was the perfect foil for Showtime. Guida grounded and controlled his opponent throughout much of the contest, earning a lopsided unanimous decision victory. Besides resulting in a loss, Showtime's debut was an incredibly dull affair, which must be especially heartbreaking for the man who is known as an exciting fighter. Of course, Pettis would go on a 6-fight win streak that would see him capture the lightweight strap. Number 1. Shogun Rua vs Forrest Griffin 1. Mauricio Shogun Rua was a former Pride middleweight Grand Prix winner who made quite a name for himself in Japan. During his Pride days, the talented Brazilian picked up wins over Rampage Jackson, Alistair Overeem and Antonio Nogueira. In 2007, Rua was ready to make his highly anticipated UFC debut in the midst of a 4-fight win streak, while sporting an impressive 16-2 professional record. Given his credentials, most expected Shogun to enter the UFC title picture sooner rather than later. While the Brazilian native would go on to become a champion in the UFC's light heavyweight division, there were unfortunately some setbacks along the way. One such setback was the former Ultimate Fighter winner FORREST Griffin. FORREST Griffin and Shogun Rua faced off for the first time at UFC 76 in September of 2007. To the surprise of many, Griffin shocked the world by earning a third-round submission victory. However, roughly 4 years later, Shogun would avenge the loss by knocking out Griffin in just under 2 minutes. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching guys, and we'll see you on the next video.